All right, good afternoon. This is the Senate Government Operations Committee. Today is Wednesday, April 10th. And we are getting back to some work on H649. As you might recall, this is the bill that the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and we had talked about sort of dovetailing this bill with the work that we did on S55, the open meeting law bill. So we have a new draft, and Damien is here to walk us through the changes that were made. So I'm gonna turn it over to Damien. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Damien Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So the draft is draft 1.1 of the committee's amendment, dated yesterday at 9:57 a.m. If you look at the draft, there are no changes until we get to page 8. So the very bottom of page 8, you'll see some yellow highlighting. And so this is the new section 911 that was proposed to be added. What we did here is I sat down with my colleague, Tim Devlin, who was working on S55, and we compared and contrasted the provisions. And we realized that because the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is an advisory body for all practical purposes, and there is one change we're making to their authority to fully put them into that category. They're going to be allowed to do fully remote meetings unless there's a request from a member of the public pursuant to the provisions of S55 that they designate a physical meeting location or provide some form of electronic or telephonic access to the meeting. And so this is on page 5 of S55 as it left the Senate. And that request has to be made in writing, not less than 3 business days before the date of the meeting. And there's no need to provide a basis. You can just request that access. And they would be required to grant that request unless it was infeasible due to a declared state of emergency or a local incident, as that's defined in S55. So essentially, because they have this remote meeting ability, this is a roundabout way of getting back to what's changed in this section. And the key change here is that we've gotten rid of the limited access meetings, because the limited access meetings are not necessary if you can do remote meetings full time, because you don't have to worry about a physical threat of someone coming to the meeting if you're doing remote meetings. So, and that was one of the keys with the limited access meetings, is because there have been threats to health and safety of members of the commission and their staff. There were concerns about how do we protect the health and safety, but because S55 provides for remote meetings for advisory bodies, you don't need to be able to limit access to a physical location. And then if there is someone who is disruptive during the meeting, you would handle that the same way you would handle someone who's disruptive during a regular public bodies meeting. So particularly with electronic meetings, there are, ways to kind of control who's speaking and so forth. But this sort of takes that piece out. So it eliminates one of the pieces that's been controversial in this bill. It does leave in the deliberative discussions piece.
Hold on 1 second. Senator White, do you have a question on this?
Yeah. So this bill happens, S55 gets vetoed. We don't override it. It dies. What happened? I'm so sorry. I'm just so. But what would happen?
So
Because this bill is less likely to be vetoed than S55. Maybe they're both likely to get vetoed.
I don't think that's true.
I know that.
Let's say it were.
Let's take the hypothetical. What would happen, Davey?
So with the hypothetical here, what would happen is you'd go back to the reversion to open meeting law, with. So we're looking at, I believe, July 1, we lose the pandemic era hybrid and remote meeting permissions. And if S55 doesn't pass, we go back to where we were before that. So we'll probably be back here in
so it's a whole
January
different-
addressing a revised version of S55, assuming you don't override a veto, if a veto were to happen. Or a revised version of the provisions in here, but it'd be a new legislature addressing the issue. Anew here, so this would still allow for. As we'll see on the next page, it would still allow for the deliberative discussions. Of two commissioners. And it does provide a definition of deliberation, so we would allow for those discussions. But they would have the issue of having to have a physical location for their meetings.
Okay.
Going forward for the monthly meetings and any additional meetings beyond that.
Okay.
So
That's 55 did not
if
become
S
law.
55 did
I
not,
mean, I think, you know, S55 had a unanimous vote in the Senate, I think we came to a really good, sort of compromise landing spot, so I don't think it's in, I mean, not what, but I don't think it's in
The crosshairs?
the crosshairs, and the House knows it's a must-pass bill and are working on it, and they are going to make a small adjustment to the local incident definition that would, you know, accommodate, you know, if there were a threat against a member of a board, that would also count as a incident. So, I think we're in coordination sufficiently that it will sugar off about.
That alleviates my concern, because that we've had discussions and Senator Watson and I have had discussions, and it seems like both committees, sometimes legislative council has different comfortability with cross-referencing active legislation in other bills.
yes, we're not
And so-
cross-referencing,
Oh, we're not,
we're
okay,
just relying on S55.
Yeah,
To
so-
cover that.
okay, so that means, okay, so there's even less risk.
Yeah, there's no cross-reference to that bill,
Yeah.
this just would. You know, set them up to be an advisory
Yeah,
body, which there are many, as we all know, many advisory bodies, this would just be one of them. Yeah, Senator Buhoski, do you have a further question?
I do. If on the off chance S55 were not to become law, there would be nothing to stop us from reverting back to the older administrative veto session and giving this board that power that S55 would have, correct? Like, we can still protect this board for January if for some reason S55 doesn't go.
If we have a veto session lasts more than 2 days, because we have to get it
Yeah.
passed by both bodies.
I mean, we could rush something through, if we had all the votes to suspend rates, so that would be the thing. But I don't wanna start panicking, because I think that we're not in a situation where we have to worry about S55.
There's no
But,
cause.
I mean, of course, knocking on wood a lot, but, Senator Watson?
Thank you. Well, my thought was that less of a risk veto, but more perhaps risk that S55 gets changed enough so that it doesn't do what we want it to do.
Yeah, and I've been in discussion with the chair over there, and he knows that we're trying to coordinate the bills.
Oh, good.
I think it's better that we have this commission be like any other commission and not single them out with something special. And that's better for them, and their credibility, and better for our, you know, we argued over and over again that we wanted consistency across boards, and this would make them consistent with every other board. They would be an advisory board, just like a lot of other advisory boards. So I feel, you know, who knows, the way everything goes, but I feel as comfortable as I could.
Yeah, like I feel like it's risk, but it's very low risk.
Yes.
Yeah. Senator Norris.
Yes, thank you. Are you, I don't wanna interrupt, are you done the walkthrough, Damian, or?
oh, no, I'm not even close, but that's okay. This is fine, we're talking about this issue here, if it's not related to the issue of the meeting structure,
Oh,
I'm like, okay, perfect, then let's do
I
it.
apologize, I made one or two meetings here, but having said that, so now that this board can go remote. Was there still another clause in here where they could have meetings not open to the public or such as that?
That is taken out, so
That's
that was
taken out.
in what the house passed.
Perfect.
That was the limited access meetings, and that's the biggest change in this section. That was the first 2 pages of this section previously, and that's gone.
Because we didn't let anyone else in the S55 to do just that.
Correct.
Comments as far as consistency, I like that.
Correct.
Right, so
Exactly.
at our last discussion of this, the charge from the committee was to speak with my colleague who's working on S55, figure out if it's already covering some of the concerns, and the answer was it is. And then what can we get rid of in this bill? And so we were able to get rid of that limited access meeting. And this, I don't want to speak for the parties. I know there were concerns about these deliberative discussions and other things from some of the witnesses you've heard. But this eliminates one of the provisions that had generated concerns, so.
Yeah.
um,
And Senator Norris, that's exactly what we were trying to do, was make it consistent so that everybody follows the same rules. We were pretty clear with that with S55, and let's do the same for this.
I'm happy with all of your decisions.
Okay, awesome. I love it. I like that, thank you.
or when the committees come together.
I know, isn't it great? I always strive for that, doesn't always work, but.
Yeah, the holdout, love's the holdout.
Yeah, well, then there are always those moments when you get that moment where everyone comes together in either the Senate or the House on something, and then it gets over to the other side, and they're like, what is this?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
All right, carry on, Damien.
here we go. So this still does allow for the discussions of 2 members of the commission or 2 or more members of the commission. So 2 or more commissioners, basically, without triggering the open meeting law requirements as long as they're deliberations. One thing that occurred to me based on the discussions at our last hearing on this was that we had a cross-reference in here to the deliberations definition for quasi-judicial bodies that are hearing sort of cases and controversies, which one, I think it left questions for people as they were reading the bill, like what is a deliberation, what's allowed? And 2, it wasn't 100% on point with the work that the commission did. So what I did is I took that definition, I made some modifications, and I put it in the bill here so you can look at it directly and then make amendments to it as necessary. And this should also hopefully help the parties that have been weighing in on this kind of determine whether this is a suitable definition or needs tweaks, and they can speak to you about that. So the deliberations means weighing, examining, and discussing information gathered by the commission and the reasons for and against an act or decision. However, deliberations excludes taking evidence, hearing arguments for or against an act or decision of the commission, taking public comment, and importantly, making any decision related to an act or the official duties of the commission. And so this is to avoid a decision happening behind closed doors. And then also, one of the things I would say here is just looking at this as I'm thinking about it, is you do have the provision of existing law that we amend in section 9, which has also generated some discussion with private proceedings. So in the original bill, we permitted the commission to allow individuals to be interviewed privately, and to have any recording of the interview kept confidential, and then permitting that any record or document produced in relation to that interview would then be available to the public in an anonymized form so that the individual's identity wasn't revealed, but the facts could be revealed, or the information provided could be revealed. It occurs to me that you probably want to say expressly excludes taking evidence, except as otherwise provided pursuant to section 910 of this chapter.
Okay, we should add that,
Yeah, because otherwise I think
yeah.
arguably you're in conflict there because those interviews are an information gathering process.
Yeah.
Okay, are people okay with that? Yeah, and this type of deliberative work happening, without triggering the quorum is, or it having the deliberative meetings not be an open, is consistent with what happens already for quasi judicial,
That's right.
boards.
So,
Yeah,
I don't think we have an advisory board that has a similar authority, but we do have quasi judicial boards
Yeah.
where when they're deliberating about a case in front of them, they can deliberate privately, but then they have to announce decisions, and the decisions are public records. But they can deliberate over the evidence that's been presented to them and have discussions of that privately. So this would be unique for advisory bodies. So that's really the policy question is, do you want to provide that authority for an advisory body? Is it appropriate in this case? Are there other limitations you want to put on it? For example, what should be excluded? What should be included in that? So that's part of why moving the definition into this bill also lets you make those tweaks rather than relying on a cross-reference to a definition for a slightly different kind of public body. Or a different kind of public body. So that's in here. So I think that's probably your policy question. I'm sure your witnesses will have comments for you on whether this language makes sense or needs tweaks, or maybe is not good at all. So
okay. Are there questions for Damien at this point?
Yeah, you had me. But.
no, I lost
He's gonna
you.
lock in the game. I don't have a problem necessarily to speak there with, protecting victims, witnesses, whatever else, but I think that the board should still be. And so that the public can have access to, at least, without mentioning names or the questions, whatever else, if you wanna protect the witness, that's great, or the victim. You can, they don't have to be on the camera, they have to be in the room or the remote, they're not gonna be in the room.
Mhm.
But I still think that as far as them meeting and openly discussing or whatever they're doing, I think that still should be public record.
Yeah, one of the challenges for this body is not only the sort of sensitive material that they're talking about potentially, but there are only 3 of them. So, and they are full-time, like employees of the state, so everything they're doing, they could trigger the open meeting law if we don't put exceptions. Even if they're just, in the office together talking about, oh, are you gonna interview that person? Are you gonna do this, research? Are you gonna, that could trigger the open meeting law because there's a quorum of 2 of the 3 of them together creates a quorum. So it makes their work somewhat
more
impractical.
Yeah.
It's clunky for them to do anything together because of the quorum issue. So this would provide them the opportunity to talk about their work and deliberate about how they're gonna carry out the work without triggering an open meeting law, but still exclude the things that, when they're taking evidence and making decisions and really trying to weigh the pros and cons of something, that would have to be done in public meeting.
In public meeting.
Yeah,
Okay, so you're saying 2 of them could deliberate, because I'm wondering about the 3 being state employees, that doesn't open up is that way you get rid of the hybrid meet, because they're not state agents, but state employees kind of representing.
no, the hybrid meeting we are able to get rid of because
They're
they're advisory.
Okay,
They are just they're giving advice to the legislature.
so 2 of them can deliberate out of the 3.
Yes.
Or all 3 of them.
All 3 of
could.
them.
All 3 of them can deliberate.
Yeah, but they can't make decisions, they can just talk about their stuff. And then if they're gonna make a decision, like, we're gonna include this in our report as a recommendation to the legislature, that has to be done in open meeting.
So this is work for them. I assume.
Well, we're gonna hear from them afterwards, but I think Damien did talk to them while he was doing
I
this,
think
but.
this is an important carve out. But I would add the section, the exemption for section 9. I think that's the additional thing.
It's in the updated language that I'm working in the draft
that
as I
we're
talk to you. No, you haven't seen it. It'll
Oh,
be in the next draft. I just made the note for that change. So,
He's multitasking. And so, just one second, Damien, Senator Norris, I guess I just would, we're trying to be as consistent as possible in the bill so that to not carve out too many things. So that was what we were doing with the S-55 thing. And I think that this carve out is consistent with what we do for quasi judicial deliberations. This is not a quasi judicial board, but what they're doing is that sort of sensitive deliberation about sensitive topics, like things that are confidential information about people's own experiences.
What did we do with, I don't know, with PUC or the CUD or whatever, I remember they used to meet in completely. Private, we eliminated them from meeting privately, right? They were releasing information.
The PUC has been completely exempt from open meeting law since the late 1980s. They are exempt, they don't have to, and we heard testimony from them, I think you were here, about what they do instead of the open meeting law. They have their own procedures and they do have open meetings, but they are allowed to deliberate in private. The PUC is.
So I know that. Good question.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we were questioning it, but then we didn't tackle it because it's a kind of a big thing to deal with.
We can't tackle it.
No,
I know.
I know.
the one big thing we didn't.
Bob, I held back.
Okay.
Yes, they are allowed to deliberate, the three of them in private, that the PUC is.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Just touching all my bases.
yep, no, I appreciate it. I anticipated this.
Thanks for the transparency.
Senator Nahosky.
Yeah, well, and I think, and to my understanding, one of the other pieces in here that's a little bit of an exception to how we treat other boards is because it's full-time. And I'm not really
Yeah.
aware of any of our other advisory boards or commissions that are full-time positions. So anytime they would be coming together in a less full-time capacity, they're in all likelihood
I
more
think,
officially discussing.
yeah, I think the PUC people are
But
more
they're
like,
also completely exempt.
yeah. And
They're
Green Mountain
utility.
Care Board is another one that are more like full-time employees. They are,
But there are only 3 of them.
there are 5.
But that's like, I don't know of any other 3-member board that is
Yeah.
full-time.
Anything
They
one day?
are-
NRB is how we.
But they're not paid full time.
Oh,
yeah, I
That's
can't
part of
off the
what
top
we're
of my
looking at
head.
now.
Tucker is the one who.
Yeah, I mean, I think the PUC is the closest one. There are 3 members. They're, paid more or less full-time employees but they have a ton of staff too that does work for them. And that's another big difference is this commission does not have a ton of staff that's doing a lot of the legwork. So they're actually
One,
doing
staff,
it
one,
themselves.
or 2.
No, we have executive director, researcher, myself, and an administrative assistant.
Oh, gosh, just think of what we could do with 4 staff.
I know.
All right,
We're gonna do
Damien,
some.
carry on.
scared.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, I'm starting to think about that.
I'm not gonna touch that one, but we can talk offline about the experience of working in a legislature where state reps and senators do have staff.
Yes,
Um,
I've done that.
So I was a staff person for a state senator in another state.
Yeah, you and Ruth have this in common that you were a staff.
Yes, yeah, I actually worked in the same state as Ben Novogrodsky from our office. We just worked in different bodies. I was in the Senate, he was in the Assembly. But anyway,
In New York.
in New York,
Yeah.
yes. You're gonna see one little blip of yellow on page 10. And that is where I struck out the intent language for the limited access meetings, because we don't need it. And then
I don't see the flip of yellow, but that's.
It is.
Line 9.
line 9, yes.
Very end after the word.
Two
Oh my
C.
God, that is like a super flip.
It is,
It's like minute. It's the smallest
Zepto
flip I've ever
flip, if you
seen.
will.
A Zapdo flip. It's a Zapdo flip. It's
I cut it
great.
off myself, I'm sorry.
Well done.
Well, good
Happy
call.
Friday, you're taking advantage of it.
Wow. Gotta know my audience here. Lose you guys.
Yes, yeah, it's easy to do.
Read the room, Dave. Read it.
Okay, page 12, I'm bringing you back, page 12.
Page 12, so there's a new section on page 12. This is amending the powers and duties of the commission. So 2 years ago, when you guys created the commission, or when this body created the commission, they were given rulemaking authority, just in case. They have not used that, and our understanding is that they don't intend to use it. And that was the one piece here that didn't really fit well with the advisory board.
Right.
And so we're just repealing that rulemaking authority to really put them firmly into that advisory body box. Because it doesn't make sense for them to, one, have authority they're not gonna use, and honestly, the rulemaking procedure is complicated enough that it would pull them all off of their regular work for probably 6 months to get that done, so.
Yeah,
It makes that consistent with other bills we passed already this session.
yes,
Yes.
yep.
So,
Senator
Where
Norris,
does
go
it
ahead.
go, where does it go from B, carry out its duties pursuant to chapter the commissioners may, and then it just,
so
just hang it out there?
There's a
yeah,
bunch
there's
of
another, oh, you know what, I actually just realized we are amending 906 above already. I will combine it in the next draft, because we add subdivision 13 to that, so there's 12 other things listed there, I just omitted them to save on it. Length, but I'm happy to send the committee a link to 1 VSA 906.
Sections.
It is, I'll send it to Olivia
It's right up there.
and the committee, and that way you can read through what their other powers are.
Okay, so you'll move this change earlier in the bill,
I will,
okay?
so
Awesome.
I had forgotten that that was in there, because we've spent almost all of our time talking about what the appropriate meeting authority is for them.
Yeah,
Very little time talking about the other pieces of the bill.
great. All right, so are there any further questions for Damien on this? My gosh, you're.
Oh my God.
That's good lobbying right there.
I'm getting your number.
Any other questions for Damien? Okay, excellent. Thank you, Damien, if you're able. Are you able to stick around or not? Do you have to?
I've already gotten a call from across the hall, they're working on the
Okay.
capital bill, and
Okay, well, we know where to
Oh,
find
gosh,
you.
yeah.
so what I'll plan to do is watch the testimony tonight, if there are things I need to catch up on, so if someone can just email me and say,
I'll let you know if you need
So-
to make any changes.
Just to clarify what we just talked about, we're taking section 13 and incorporating it into section 7.
that's correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then adding the confidential interviews to the deliberations.
Yes,
And that otherwise, we're gonna stick with this. Thank you, to you and to Tim for coordinating this, with S55. And yeah, so we're gonna hear from the commission and from the press association. There was one other person who asked to testify that I wasn't able to get in today, so we're gonna probably do one more, not today, so we have one more person to testify. Thanks, Steve.
thank you for your
Good
time.
luck across the hall.
Thank you.
So, Michelle, you wanna come on up and join us at the table?
I
And
was gonna say that Mia only has just a few more minutes.
so I think,
So if,
She says
I
she's
moved
okay.
around, I moved around my appointment, no worries.
oh,
okay,
nice.
Moved it around.
I
Just
didn't
do
have
it.
listed as wanting to testify. If you want to, we can hear from you, but otherwise, if you're,
Oh, I'm here for support for Michelle. Anything just to add on. Don't worry about my schedule. I've cleared it. It was just it was an interview with a new committee member.
Ooh,
But
nice.
we were able to reschedule that. So no big deal.
Excellent.
Mhm.
All right, thank you very much.
Yep.
So hi, Michelle, if you want to just introduce yourself for the record and
I'm Michelle Rivera,
let us know,
General Legal Counsel for the Commission.
excellent. Let us know if you've had, what your comments are on the updates to the draft.
Yeah, well, because Damien is such a good team worker and I feel like you all have really done a great job of listening to us and others. We feel like we are on the same page. We really appreciate being listened to. And it was nice to hear sort of like the transparent discussions about why you're doing what you're doing. We feel like we understand that. And we are hopeful that you will pass it out as soon as possible so that we could please hire that commissioner and move forward. with
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, we realize that you're sort of stuck, so that's why I would love to pass this out this week if we can. I did just, like I said, get a request from one more person, and I don't wanna tell them no because I don't want hard feelings about the bill, so,
I understand. We were listened to, so I'm like certainly not taking that from anyone else.
yeah. Yeah, well, good, so what the changes in the bill as drafted work for you,
They do.
okay,
I think, yeah, I'll need to think about them a little bit and think that work.
alright, awesome, well, we still have a little bit more time if anything comes to mind, but great to hear that they work for you.
Yeah, I would only just emphasize the importance of people being able to tell their stories confidentially. I think real bottom line thinking about the commission is that Vermonters are paying their taxpayer money to be able to like move Vermont forward and heal from discrimination that's happened in the past. And we simply are not gonna be able to hear about the discrimination that's happened in the past if people feel like it has to be broadcast. So we will be, summarizing, taking names out, or whatever it might be that would give it no identifying information.
Mhm.
So if it's a very small town and a very loud case, we might have to take out the town that it happened in, or something like that. But yeah, I think the confidentiality is critical.
Yeah.
For those people, many of the stories will be told not confidentially because we were gonna have public forums and hearings for those people. Many people really want that. But some people are gonna absolutely refuse to tell their stories if that's what it has to be, particularly, sexual assault or violence. That's what it happens.
Senator Clarkson.
Yeah, and just tag on to that, because we have done so much of we have done so much policy that addresses discrimination where people have been very public about the harms that have been done to them. And so, and there's a power in having that be public. And so I would hope that most people would be public because we've had plenty of public testimony about extreme harms. So I would just hope that, because I think it's important for the public to appreciate that, because I think a lot of people think, oh, well, it's happened in the past. That they can be fairly dismissive if they aren't hearing it and knowing it and appreciating it.
If I could just interject just
Yeah,
a minute, because we are in the process of creating our action plan and the many ways that people can sort of give their statements, give their testimony, right? And so obviously there's going to be a mechanism for a public forum, and there, as you said, there are many, many people who do want to have the public hear their story, and they want people to hear it. They want that as part of the process of healing, quite frankly, because it's cathartic. But not. We realize that there are many, many stories that are not heard. Those people who are not as courageous, if you will, to be able to tell those stories, because there's still it's still very there's still relationships there in their towns or cities where people could potentially retaliate for them telling their stories. And those are the stories we want to hear as well. We want to hear we want to hear as many stories as possible. So we have to have multiple ways to be able to receive those stories. So there's definitely a public option. We have the group option, as you know, within the statute as well, where folks from different with similar backgrounds and groups can get together and tell their stories as well. And that would be a summarization of kind of shared experiences, which is important to show the pattern, especially when we're going to be sending recommendations to you all and saying, we would like this law changed or enacted, and here's why, because there's been such a pattern, right? So group statements is another mechanism for taking a statement, right? And a confidential statement. So we want to be able, we are even thinking about different ways for people to submit, whether they're videos, whether they're written. People have different ways that they want to be able to submit them, whether they're confidential or not. So we're just trying to broaden the way that people can tell their stories so that we can get as many as possible to be able to show the pattern.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Commissioner. I think there's another question, Senator Eaglesky.
Well, to the point of like creating space, while I agree we need lots of different options, but creating space, particularly when this is state policy addressing state sanctioned harm, to force someone to put that out into the public before they're ready, before it's safe for them, is continuing that harm. And so I think that in this particular instance, it's really critical that we sort of lean into a model of empowerment and self-determination to allow as many people to share as want to in whatever way feels safe for them. And so creating a space for someone, for whatever reason, they're not yet at the point where they're ready to share that harm publicly, I think is really important in this space. And to not mandate further harm as we look to heal harm is important to me. So I appreciate that there are multiple avenues and that we've recognized that there are some spaces that in the realm of empowerment and self-determination, someone may not be ready. And it's not because they're not courageous. It's not because their story doesn't matter. It is because their story does matter, that we can't silence them because they're not ready to be public.
Yeah, thank you so much for understanding that. I would just say one other piece. Before this job, I spent about 30 years representing victims of domestic and sexual violence. And one of the reasons why people didn't sometimes want to talk in court is because it's not just them that gets the blowback. They have kids in school, they have family members that it affects. So it's actually not just them, right? So people get a chance to parent and do all the things that they need to do because they have a whole other life. Right, it's not just because of country.
We are not islands.
Right, we are not. We all have many roles.
Senator Norris, go ahead.
Yes, my only concern with this bill, and I agree with me and whatever else, I want this to be public. However, what I don't see in this, and we want to protect those individuals who need protected. What I don't see in this bill is a report or a check back or.
Oh, so
That's
one of
down
the
the line.
reasons you don't see it is because it's in current law. And if Damien were here, he could explain, the commission is, their main duty is to create a huge report at the end of their work. And they have, I think, reporting along the way
We have
as
one
well.
already, yeah.
Pardon me?
We have done one already. but
Right, so there are multiple reports that happen along the way, and then their final thing is a big report on all of their work with recommendations to the legislature and the governor, I believe.
Which is why we're advisory.
And so it does culminate in a report.
26.
So I think that's one thing that if I were gonna do this bill again, I would have started with Damien walking through what current law is. So that is part of current law, and we're not changing that.
I'm not saying it's going to, okay, and hopefully it doesn't, but I'm saying all of a sudden we get 1 out of 10 individuals coming in and testifying to using this disclosure form, and they don't, and then all of a sudden, after a year we're doing it, and now we got 9 out of 10 coming in and doing this, and that's not where I want to be here.
Right,
And hopefully me as the regular curve statement says people want to public about this.
yeah, I think.
We don't know, okay, we can't address it, can't fix it, so I guess.
All right, well, that's what the report is, and we will be using all of those testimonies, regardless whether they're confidential or not, to make recommendations.
And remind us when it's due, the report.
Believe it is, I wanna say
Twenty-
May 26th,
Yeah.
as is
Yes.
in here, but the timelines that have been changed in here.
It's May 27th.
May 27th.
It's, no, we did change that date.
I know.
Yeah, you're right, you're right, the new date, I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry.
Is it May 27th?
Yeah, it's April 15th, 27th. Top of page 7. On or before April 15th, 2027, the commission shall submit a final report incorporating the findings and recommendations of each committee. Each report shall detail the findings and recommendations of the relevant committee and shall include recommendations for actions that can be taken to eliminate ongoing instances of institutional, structural, and systemic discrimination and to address the harm caused by historic incidences of institutional, structural, and systemic discrimination. So,
Okay,
and then
I.
they have to issue a draft 6 months before that, so that there's a draft report that's made public. And then they collect comments on the draft report. So that if there are concerns about anything that they are putting in their report, there's 6 months for people to, to make those concerns heard. And for the commission to react and change the report based on what they're hearing. So it's a pretty robust sort of process at the end for their reporting.
Yeah, I just thought they wanted to get it in quicker, sooner rather than later, because all is still taking place for like 3 years. And your report doesn't come down to up to 3 years later.
Right.
He may or may not be here, I mean,
Well,
Right.
we wanna hear all the people before we
Yeah,
make
that's
those
all.
recommendations, so.
Senator Bielanski.
My question is actually for Senator Norris, and I'm wondering if it eases your sort of concern at all. And part of the report was a percentage of people that used each type of reporting method. So we knew that 20%, did a group and 50% did public, and whatever's left, math is not my strong suit, as we discovered this morning. Whatever's left, would that be helpful for you in sort of, if part of that report was actually a breakdown of who told their story in which method, if I'm hearing your concern correctly?
I think it's a great starting point.
Okay.
At a minimum, I just don't see waiting 3 years for it's.
Well, there are reports before then, we've actually
Okay, that's the
submitted
original
one.
law, okay.
Yeah, and one of the reasons it got delayed, Senator, is because they're missing a third member right now, and that's one of the things we need to pass the bill for. They can't do their real work until they have 3 commissioners. And unfortunately, the way the legislation was originally passed, there was no mechanism to fill a vacancy.
I would
So-
also, if I could also just add that if there's quite a bit, oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say that the first part of the bill, Senator, section 1 is about filling a vacancy.
We made it so onerous and then we ended the process once.
Yeah.
Three.
So that they're sort of, I think, a little behind where we had hoped they would be because of this vacancy. And so we extended the time that they're allowed to do their work for that reason. Does that make sense?
It doesn't mean explain these things more. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
so but Senator
Thank you.
Bielanski's suggestion about adding to their report that they have to say, the number of people that provided testimony and the mechanism for how they provided that testimony, would that
I
be
think
helpful?
at a minimum, it's like a 2-liner, I mean, that's not a big ask.
Is that data that you all could collect and report
We'll
on?
definitely have that. data.
Okay. We
Yeah,
can
we'll
add,
definitely
okay.
have that. I would
Ian, did
just
you wanna
add,
weigh in? Or, go ahead.
no, I would just add to that it's gonna take, we have to be very intentional about how we do outreach because we have to build trust in communities. And so that's the time that we need to take. We, if we're gonna be recommending things like policy, which is very important, we want to make sure we have all of the voices at the table as possible. Quite frankly, that takes time and it takes time to build relationships. So that's what a lot of our work is now, is outreach and ensuring that we've built trust to be able, for these people to be able to come to the table and tell their stories. So that's what we'll be doing essentially in the next few months as well. So that It's not just you put a call out, come tell your story. There's all these people who say, well, why would I tell you stories? Why would we want to do that? Because we're not even guaranteed that telling my story is going to lead anywhere except for additional harm. So we have to build trust. We have to create spaces where there's safety, there's healing, all of that. Sorry, I have a lot of background noise, but I just wanted to insert that's the time that we need as well as a third commissioner, of course.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for your testimony and your work. We have one more person to hear from,
And I just say that, Bob, you could, they have a website, so you could look at the first report on the website. We can all do that.
excellent, yeah.
I don't think we have it on.
Would you like, could we add their website to and could you send us around the link?
Yeah.
Or you know, I'll make that.
Lisa Loomis,
What's tough when we don't know?
from the Press Association, I see you up, your name on the screen, are you there still?
I
Thank you.
am here, yes.
Hi, thank you. Are you able to undo your camera so we can see you or not?
No, I have not had my video card fixed yet.
Oh,
Sorry, I'm
Right,
waiting for,
I've
I'm
done
waiting for
that,
time
okay.
to take my computer down to the shop and get it fixed.
I'm sorry. That is such a hassle. I'm so sorry for that. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience. Have you seen the newest version of the bill?
I have. Olivia was kind enough to send it to me at 1 o'clock, and I did listen as Damien was going through the changes. And I apologize if my testimony is a bit scattered and incoherent because I have questions on what Damien said compared to what Olivia sent me at 1 o'clock. So
Okay,
some of it will be testimony and some of it will be questions for you guys.
okay, that's not fair enough. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for hearing from me. I'm Lisa Loomis, editor and co-owner of the Valley Reporter, and I'm the president of the Vermont Press Association. And we are appreciative of the opportunity to comment again on this legislation. We appreciate that the limited access meetings provision has been removed. Thank you for that responsiveness. But we do remain steadfast in our opposition to any effort to weaken, circumvent, or create carve-out from Vermont's open meeting law. One of you stated earlier in the meeting that we don't want to single out this commission and want to treat it like all advisory boards. In our opinion, that would speak to no open meeting law carve-outs. Everybody needs to follow the same rules. We do understand the important, timely, and sensitive work that the commission is undertaking, and we reiterate our position that this work needs the bright light of day. It needs sunshine and not secrecy. When we last heard from commission members in the House, I think it was last week or the week before, we heard a lot about stories and people being able to safely tell their stories. It is those very stories that Vermonters can learn from through an open and transparent process. Vermonters don't need to hear those stories filtered by commission members. The work they are doing is important and should take transparently. Now, specific question about section 909, which I heard Damien speak to, it talks about conducting interviews in a manner that protects the individual's privacy and to have any recording of the interview kept confidential. And then the next sentence is, any document produced shall only be available in an anonymized form. Is this contradictory? Are both of those clauses, are they saying the same thing? That's
Where are you specifically in the
this
bill?
section 909.
Page 8.
Okay, so are section 9 of the bill,
Section 909, and it talks about people being interviews, recordings are kept confidential, the individual's privacy is protected. And I think Wendy Mays raised this when we last discussed this, that it's better to keep a script, a text of the interview and just have the person's information anonymized. If the interview is kept confidential by the commission, no one can learn from it. But if the interview is anonymized, I can learn about systemic impacts of discrimination and racism. So I feel like it's contradictory in that paragraph is contradictory.
well, one thing I'll say is the bulk of this paragraph is current law. It was in the original bill as passed original legislation was passed 2 years ago, I believe. So that language that you just read is in current law. I think what the commission is saying, and what we just heard from them, is keeping people's identities confidential is important, and in some cases, their story may reveal personal information that would make it difficult to keep them anonymous. So I think that's what this provision is supposed to be addressing.
Okay, we may want to come back to that, and I understand it's important to get this bill out as soon as possible. I'll move on.
Okay.
And I have more questions about deliberations of the quorum and the members not being subject to open meeting law, and the definition that Damien read for deliberations means weighing, examining, discussing, excuse me, information gathered by the commission. And we're asking again whether the commission is engaged in actions that would warrant such closed-door deliberative sessions. Do Vermonters not have the right to see the sausage get made? We would like a little more clarification on section 912's intent in terms of holding open sessions. And we do appreciate that the commission has to make its decision in public. And I know that quasi-judicial bodies can deliberate privately, and now, am I understanding correctly that all advisory bodies will be able to deliberate privately?
No, just this one. This is specific to the deliberations of this 3-member body. And in large part because they are 3 members, and so 2 of them trigger quorum, and also because the information that they are deliberating about could be very sensitive and difficult if it were to be made public. But again, any of the decisions would have to be made in public.
Understood. And we still find that problematic and would suggest that there be more commissioners as opposed to less open government. And
Okay.
the 3-day provision in requesting a meeting in person, or I'm sorry, a meeting place. Yesterday, the Press Association testified about this bill before the House GovOps Commission, and we pointed out that a regular agenda must be posted 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and a special meeting or an emergency meeting, the agenda must be posted 24 hours before. How are people going to be able to meet the 3-day requirement when requesting an actual meeting place?
So that's in S55. So that would have to be addressed in S55 if that were inconsistent. But Senator Beals.
Okay.
My understanding is why it's 3 days, so that the request can be made, and when the agenda goes out, the physical meeting location can be made public.
In the agenda, exactly. Yeah, I think that was one of our thinking, was that then if somebody's requested a physical meeting location or a Zoom link, then it could be made public that there would be an option. But again, that's part of S55. It's not something we can address in this bill.
Understood. I think perhaps I was confused by what Damien said when he referenced that section of S55. And right, oftentimes things are posted on agendas and you realize you do want to testify or attend a public hearing. So I can't necessarily know in advance that I'm going to want to speak at a meeting of an advisory board or public body because I don't know what's on their agenda, just for the record. And
Right.
finally, we want to conclude with an example that was provided by Wendy Mays of the Vermont Broadcasters Association when this bill was previously discussed. She asked about the credibility and legitimacy of the work years down the line when someone, a college student or researcher or member of the public, was reviewing the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and wanted to understand the process, only to find there was no public process, no reviewable facts on which the work and recommendations are based. And we think her point is valid, and we urge you to err on the side of open government to the degree that you can. And we do understand the sensitivity of this work, but we can't have exceptions to rules that serve Vermonters very well. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I think I really appreciate your testimony, and this committee, I can assure you, is is definitely in favor of open government. We spent a long time trying to make sure we could get it right in S-55. And the senator to my right here in particular was kind of a dog with a bone on that one, I can tell you. And I do think we hear from the commissioner and their legal counsel that they will be doing as much as possible, taking testimony on the record in public. And if there are things that we need to address after we see, we will do so, you know, whoever is in these chairs next session. But appreciate your testimony, and hopefully we have moved the bill in a direction that you're a little bit more supportive of at this point. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the work you do.
Yeah, take care. All right, committee, we are, like I said, we're gonna not vote on this today. We're gonna come back to it either tomorrow or Friday with one more witness who wants to testify on it. And then we're gonna try to get it out this week so that the commission can move along with its work. We are gonna take
Because we're expecting some changes, so that's good.
and then Dana will come back with another draft the next time. So we're gonna take a 6-minute break to 3 o'clock. And then